It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. US and Russian delegates meet for 12 hours to discuss a ceasefire deal for Ukraine as missiles strike residential buildings and a school in the Ukrainian city of Sumy. Security breach. The Trump administration is reviewing how a magazine journalist was added to a message chat detailing attack plans on Yemen. Also tonight, the son of Gisele Pelicot, raped by her husband and dozens of men he recruited, describes hearing for the first time what his father had done to his mother.
He was my father, but he's not anymore. Today, he's a monster.
Airlines threaten Heathrow Airport with legal action after its full-day shutdown cancelled more than 1,000 flights. A sixth night of protests in Turkey as people demonstrate against the president.
Everyone's running now, and they are firing rubber bullets at us.
And it's 2 wins for 2 for new head coach Thomas Tuchel as England beat Latvia 3-0 at Wembley in a World Cup qualifier. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. Another round of peace talks got underway today between Russia and the US about the war in Ukraine. And tonight, a suggestion by Moscow that there had been some progress with a joint statement expected tomorrow. But as delegates met, missiles hit the Ukrainian city of Sumy. 88 people, including 17 children, were injured as the strikes came down on a residential area, including a school. Kyiv says a powerful cyber attack also hit Ukraine's state railway service today, causing chaos for many, with the Ukrainians blaming Russia for trying to further destabilise the war-torn country. From Moscow, Ivor Bennett reports.
Apparently, the focus was on peace, but it certainly didn't feel like it. In the eastern city of Sumy, Ukraine says dozens were injured, including children, in a Russian missile strike. Officials claim several residential buildings were damaged, along with a school and a hospital. While in Kyiv, they were recovering after a third consecutive overnight attack. Far from an ideal backdrop, then, to the latest talks in Saudi Arabia, where US officials met a Russian delegation hoping to reach a ceasefire in the Black Sea. After 12 hours, the talks ended with no obvious breakthrough, only rumours of a joint statement on Tuesday. But Donald Trump still sounds optimistic that a deal's within reach.
We're talking about territory right now. We're talking about lines of demarcation. We're talking about power plant ownership. Some people are saying the United States should own the power plant and then work it that way because we have the expertise to fix it up, et cetera, et cetera.
Optimism from Moscow too, but for a different reason. On state TV, they were jubilantly reporting that Washington now agrees with Russia on its territorial claims in Ukraine. That's after comments from Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's negotiator, which sounded a lot like he was parroting the Kremlin.
There's a sensibility in Russia that Ukraine is a false country,
right,
that they just patch together in this sort of mosaic, these regions, and that's the root cause, in my opinion, of this war, that Russia regards those 5 regions as rightfully theirs since World War II. And that's something that nobody wants to talk about.
Witkoff wasn't in Riyadh for the latest talks, but that didn't quell Ukraine's anger, with some there demanding he be removed from the wider negotiations. According to Ukraine, Witkoff's comments show a lack of understanding of the conflict and a favouritism towards Russia. But in many ways, these fears are nothing new, because since the Trump administration began its push for peace, its only criticism has been for Ukraine, even though it's Russia who are the only ones yet to agree to a full ceasefire and the only ones yet to show any sign of compromise. It all makes one wonder, where does the power really lie in the Putin-Trump dynamic? The American president sure looks like he's the one at the centre, but it feels like the bigger figure may be his opposite number. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Well, let's go to our US correspondent, Martha Kellner, who joins us now live from Washington. And Martha, that was the president speaking positively once again about the Ukraine peace talks. But tonight, a serious security breach from his administration.
Yeah, this is an astonishing story, Anna, and a truly incredible, stunning security breach. Picture this. You are the editor of The Atlantic magazine, a man named Jeffrey Goldberg. And all of a sudden, a couple of weeks ago, middle of March, he's added to a group chat on a communications platform called Signal. It's an encrypted communications platform, but it's kind of like a glorified WhatsApp. And there are 18 other members of this Signal chat, including the Vice President, J.D. Vance, the Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. And at first, this journalist, Jeff Goldberg, he thinks that this is a hoax. He has no reason to believe that he would be added to a group chat with such high-ranking security officials. He wonders whether it is an attempt to ensnare him as a journalist. It turns out a few days later that, in fact, for some reason, he has been added to this group, and those people are exactly who they appear to be. 2 hours before the United States launched a military strike, launched an attack on the Houthis in Yemen, this journalist was made aware of it because he was added to these war plans in this Signal group chat. So huge questions about why these people were using Signal, why this journalist was added to the group, and what, if anything, are they using to discuss other plans for on Signal. So huge questions for this administration. But also interesting was some of the exchanges between the individuals on this group chat. J.D. Vance, remember, publicly a very loyal vice president. He appeared to be putting daylight between himself and President Donald Trump on these security issues. He wrote in this group, "I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now." Separately, Pete Hegseth condemned support of Europe. He said it's pathetic in bloc capitals. So some really interesting exchanges and a furious reaction from Democrats on the Hill. I've just been speaking to some of them. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calling for a full investigation into this security breach. Senator for Delaware Chris Coons saying that some of the people on this Signal group may have committed crimes. I also spoke to Representative Jamie Raskin to get his take on this security breach.
And this is such a basic error to be talking about war plans and military strategy in such a sloppy and open and public way. And almost certainly there were crimes committed in the process.
With little fire and fist bump emojis, is that an appropriate way to be discussing launching military strikes?
Let's just say it doesn't surprise me coming from this crowd.
Martha Kellner updating us there from Washington. Thank you. Now, it was a case which captured the world's attention. Gisele Pelicot, the woman at the centre of a mass rape trial who became a household name after waiving her right to anonymity and bravely declaring that shame must change sides. Her attacker was her husband, Dominique Pelicot. He was jailed for drugging her and inviting dozens of men to rape her. Now, Sky News has spoken to David Pelicot about how he heard of his father's crimes. Siobhan Robbins has this exclusive report.
Gisele Pelicot is many things. The survivor who inspired a nation. The woman raped around 200 times by her ex-husband and the dozens of men he recruited. The mother who had to tell her children their father was one of France's worst sex offenders. It's that moment, a call just over 4 years ago, that her son David tells me still haunts him.
Le téléphone sonne, c'est maman.
The phone rings. I pick up the phone and it's my mum, who tells me that I have to go somewhere quiet and alone, because what she's going to tell me is so unbelievable that I should be alone. And what she told me was like a tsunami, that she was abused by many men that Dominique Pelicot, her ex-husband, had invited to rape her. I felt so many emotions rising within me, and then the nausea, which had been mounting during the entire conversation, reached a peak. I hung up the phone, and it felt like the floor gave away under my feet, and I felt sick. I went to the bathroom and threw up.
What Dominique Pelicot did was beyond betrayal. At court, he admitted filming strangers as they violated his wife, creating a sick library with thousands of images of abuse.
How did you as a son, as the oldest son, process that?
Dominique Pelicot, c'était en tout cas en ce qui me concerne,
Dominique Pelicot was, for me, the backbone of the family. He had taught me to respect women.
et la notion en fait de respect.
And so, when I heard what he had done to our own mother, as the eldest son, I was filled with anger and total incomprehension. He was my father, but he's not anymore. Today, he's a monster.
Et aujourd'hui, c'est un monstre.
Guilty of raping Gisele, Dominique has also been accused of abusing his daughter Caroline, which he denies. Before the trial, he wrote to his son, asking for forgiveness.
Donc j'ai lu avec attention son...
I read his letter carefully, but quite honestly, I tore it up and I threw it in the bin.
Déchiré et je l'ai mis à la poubelle. Demandait le pardon.
He was asking for forgiveness, but forgiveness? Personally, I will never forgive him.
What's your message to Dominique Pelicot, though? If you could speak to him now, what would you say to him?
Why? Pourquoi?
Do you think he'll ever tell you why?
Non, je ne pense pas. Il va...
No, I don't think so. I have no doubt he'll die in prison, and rightly so. But I'm convinced that he'll take many of his secrets to the grave.
While David's father will likely be forgotten, his mother will not. Gisele's bravery has inspired millions around the world and at home.
How do you see your mother?
First and foremost, she's our mum.
C'est aussi la grand-mère de nos enfants.
She's also our children's grandmother. But today, and for the rest of her life, she will be a heroine.
Jusqu'à la fin de sa vie, une héroïne. Maman essaye de se reconstruire.
Mum is trying to rebuild herself, little by little. We have endured such unspeakable pain throughout this trial.
Gisele Pelicot and her family have survived the darkest of crimes. Now, they're learning to live again. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News.
The head of a body representing more than 90 airlines which use Heathrow Airport have threatened to take legal action if a settlement over the costs incurred from Friday's closure is not agreed. More than 1,300 flights and 200,000 passengers face disruption. The boss of the airport has been summoned to face MPs' questions as to whether the entire airport needed to be shut down following the fire at an electrical substation. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso has more.
The great economic engine of Heathrow roared back into life at the start of a new week. The skies over West London crowded once more, 72 hours after a shutdown that raises fundamental questions about the resilience of the UK's biggest transport hub.
Heidi Alexander.
The government promising a full review.
There will, of course, be learnings to ensure we avoid such incidents from reoccurring. The review will also seek to understand any wider lessons to be learned for energy resilience for critical national infrastructure.
Facing tens of millions of pounds in compensation claims, airlines may turn to the courts to recoup their losses.
This is incredibly frustrating because Heathrow is the most expensive airport in the world. But in the near future, there will have to be an independent investigation of what happened and why recovery did take so long. And then from there, if we don't get good enough recourse and repayment in terms of the costs, then yes, there may be a case for legal action.
An investigation will focus on the catastrophic substation fire that temporarily cut power to the airport and the response of the private companies that run Heathrow and the national grid. National Grid insists that while the fire at North Hyde cut power to Heathrow and tens of thousands of homes, 2 other substations remained online and connected to the airport. Sky News understands these are at Laleham and Iver. So it appears the issue was not power, but how fast Heathrow was able to use it.
For them to do that reconfiguration, they had to shut the airport. There's no debate over that. That is quite a big reconfiguration job that they had to go through. So right beside Heathrow, there's a new data centre. That data centre actually consumes 2-3 times as much electricity as Heathrow does. But what they have done, like every other data centre in the UK, is they've got full resilient backup that kicks in immediately.
Heathrow and the National Grid, both privately owned companies running critical national infrastructure, face questions about their resilience. The airport about why it took so long to transfer its systems to the new power sources in the grid, about how such a catastrophic fire could have started and take out its own backups on the same substation site. The official report into what went wrong will be published in May. Passenger and business confidence may take longer to repair. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
More protests have erupted in Turkey for the 6th night. The demonstrations are linked to the arrest of Istanbul's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, who's been jailed and is the main opponent of President Erdogan, who has led the country for more than 20 years. More than 1,000 people, including several journalists, have been arrested so far. Well, Sky special correspondent Alex Crawford reports now from the protest tonight in Saraçhane in Istanbul.
Every night for the past 5 nights or so, there has been pretty much pitched battles between the police and the demonstrators, and it looks as though tonight is not going to be any different. But the authorities have warned they will not put up with this, and if they believe that there is civil disorder, they're going to break it up. You can already smell the pepper spray in the air, and you can see a number of tear gas or pepper spray has already been fired, and they have been also using rubber bullets. There's obviously been a push by the police to break up this demonstration, everyone moving fast, and the police firing what appears to be pepper spray, possibly rubber bullets as well, but a big movement of people now to get out of the way. Well, the police are making a definite move to push everyone out of the way and firing pepper spray. They've said all along that they're not going to put up with civil disorder, and they're making sure that people clear this area. The president himself had warned that they were not going to put up with any civil disorder. And quite soon after the speeches had completed, the police moved forward, no messing around, firing rubber bullets, pepper spray. You can see ambulances now. A lot of people running in panic, quite frankly. A lot of disorder, and they're continuing to fire. If you look over there, they're continuing to fire what looks like rubber bullets as the protesters are throwing projectiles back in their direction. Come on, Jake, come on. Everyone's running now, and they are firing rubber bullets at us. Pellets.
Go on.
Where's Jake?
Get out, they're still shooting. Everybody okay?
A lot of chaos, and everyone moving very quickly, which obviously is exactly what the police want. A lot of the young people we spoke to today feeling very unhappy, and they're still firing even as people are running. They don't want people to be gathering. This is quite different to the tactics that we've seen earlier in the previous nights, because the police were quite happy to let them sit there for many hours, but today, different. They decided they weren't going to put up with it any longer, and I think they got that message from President Erdogan.
Alex Crawford reporting there on another dramatic night in Istanbul. Now, 3 men have been found guilty of plotting to murder a member of the Securitas heist gang, which stole £54 million in Britain's biggest ever cash robbery. Louis Ahern, his brother Stuart Ahern and Daniel Kelly were found guilty after an Old Bailey trial. Paul Allen was left paralysed from the chest down after he was shot twice as he stood in the kitchen of his home in Woodford in East London in July 2019. The former cage fighter lived in the large rented house with his partner and 3 young children after being released from an 18-year prison sentence over the 2006 raid of a cash depot in Tunbridge in Kent. The French actor Gérard Depardieu has gone on trial in Paris over allegations that he sexually assaulted 2 women during the filming of a movie. The 76-year-old is facing charges that he groped a set dresser and an assistant director in 2021. He denies any wrongdoing. Microsoft say they're looking to artificial intelligence to combat a surge in hacking attempts by criminals. Vasu Jackal, who is the Vice President of Security at the US tech giant, has told Sky News they tracked 30 billion phishing emails last year, and it's simply impossible for humans to deal with that volume.
What is getting harder is the barriers to entry for being a criminal have reduced. So you can very easily find these toolkits and launch an attack against an organization, which is why these numbers are pretty daunting for us. So yeah, we see that sophistication, we see that sort of global proliferation as well, and easier access that they have to technology. And this is, one of the reasons, again, we are doing all we can to innovate using AI.
The government sent a message to councils today: fix potholes or lose the money. Tough talk from Westminster as the Chancellor prepares to deliver her spring statement. Rachel Reeves has a challenge on her hands and needs to find billions of pounds, but insists there will be no return to austerity. Still, unions are warning today that key services could deteriorate as a result of cuts to the civil service. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has been analysing what we could expect on Wednesday from the Treasury.
Wednesday, the day the Chancellor's got to get the public finances back on track. And here's Rachel Reeves' problem in a nutshell. She set herself very tight borrowing limits. By 2029, day-to-day government spending must be funded entirely by taxes and not at all by borrowing, which we haven't achieved, you can see all this borrowing above the line, in decades. Back when she set this target in October, her own watchdog, the Office of Budget Responsibility, found she was only going to succeed by the slimmest of margins, a touch under £10 billion. But since last October, growth, look at this, is down 2% to 1%. Borrowing is up to £151 billion. All of this means her headroom is wiped out and she misses her own target. So she's got to find immediate savings across government to replace it. So what's she going to do? Well, actually, we've got a pretty good idea because of these two. Budget-type events used to be state secrets, but after their mini-budget, the Treasury doesn't like surprises anymore. So we think Rachel Reeves has to fill a black hole of about £10 billion. It might be a touch more. And she cannot break her borrowing promises, and she needs to restore the headroom to at least what it is at the moment. So this requires the following immediate action. We heard some of it last week: squeezing welfare spending, cuts to disability payments. Then there's squeezes to future government spending. Rachel Reeves says this means efficiencies and civil service cuts, but no return to austerity. We'll see. And then, finally, there's a technical accounting change. A month ago, Keir Starmer increased defence spending by squeezing aid spending. Because of an accounting anomaly, this helps the Chancellor to the tune of billions. Now, the big call on Wednesday will be how much to squeeze future public spending levels. But look back over spending settlements of the last 30 years. It's not going to be easy. Rises of 2, 3, 4, even 5% almost, all the time apart from the post-2010 austerity years of the coalition. But look at this, decent increases last year, this year. But after 2026, Rachel Reeves was plotting increases of just 1.3%. But on Wednesday, this could drop to 1.2 or 1.1%. And with areas like health protected, some government departments could see real terms cuts. Is it austerity light? Then there's welfare. We are told that Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall saved Rachel Reeves £5 billion last week. But we only found out where the savings come from precisely on Wednesday in an impact assessment that gets published on the same day as the spring statement. Which disabled people lose out the most? That could be a major flashpoint. Rachel Reeves will say the world has changed, although she's stuck to the same borrowing rules and tax promises as the autumn. The big question is whether this level of tax and spend overall is sustainable in the long term, or whether, come the autumn, if growth still hasn't arrived, the next budget brings yet more tax hikes.
Sam Coates reporting there. Well, to the sport now. England have beaten Latvia 3-0 in their World Cup European qualifier at Wembley. Chelsea's Reece James, making his first England start for 2.5 years, gave England the lead with this direct free kick. Into the second half, and Declan Rice played the ball across the face of the goal to give captain Harry Kane the easiest of finishes to make it 2-0. Kane's goal in the 68th minute, and just 8 minutes later, England scoring a third to make it 2 wins from 2 for the new England head coach, Thomas Tuchel. But that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the former Conservative Special Advisor Selma Shaw. Welcome and lovely to see both of you. Among the stories we will be discussing then, this on the front page of... Oh no, that's a tease, isn't it? We'll be right back with more.
are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories tonight. At least 74 people have been injured in the latest Russian missile strike on Ukraine as officials from Washington and Moscow resume discussions about a ceasefire. The son of Gisele Pelicot, raped by her husband and 50 men, has described his horror at hearing what his father had done to his mother. And top US national security officials texted war plans for upcoming military strikes in Yemen to a group chat which included a journalist, according to The Atlantic magazine. Well, hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. Welcome and lovely to see both of you. So let's take a look at the front pages then, shall we? Starting with the Metro. As ceasefire talks continue, the Metro calls the Russian bombing of a Ukrainian hospital Putin's brutal peace offering. The Express makes an impassioned plea to the US president. Mr. Trump, wake up. Ukrainians are the victims. Ahead of the spring statement on Wednesday, the Eye understands there are fears among Labour MPs that the government could abandon the pensions triple lock. The Financial Times hears that Donald Trump is threatening to impose 25% import tariffs on any country that buys Venezuelan oil. The Telegraph speaks to plumbing impresario Charlie Mullins, who claims the Honours Committee threatened to strip him of his OBE unless he attended diversity training after criticising London Mayor Sir Sadiq Khan on social media. In The Guardian, a warning from police that more domestic abusers are driving victims to suicide. The Daily Mail has this headline: Labour to block bid to ban solar panels made by slaves. And The Star shares the very important news that the TV gardener Alan Titchmarsh doesn't like the flowers used in the detective show Grantchester. Well, Steve and Sam are here. That's quite a mixed bag of front pages, to be fair, is it not? But let's head to a story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Steve, which is an accidental leaking of what should have been extremely secure American intelligence.
Yeah, and in a way this represents the mixed bag tonight. We're in a huge week internationally and domestically, but as you say, the front pages are all over the place. And this story represents it really. On one level, this story is hilarious, but deadly serious, because Trump's top kind of cabinet team were on a WhatsApp exchange. And they were revealing their views on Europe and all kinds of things, which we can come to. But either accidentally or perhaps one of them deliberately. Anyway, one way or another, it ended up, this WhatsApp group, the name of the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic was added to it, one of the biggest critics of this administration. And that's the hilarious side, because he must have been sitting there on his phone.
I mean,
and
this
suddenly,
is some of it, actually, isn't it?
And now that, so, you know, he received all this, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, and it's the defense secretary, it's Vance. And in terms of the content, it kind of confirms what we know. But to seeing it so casually expressed behind the scenes, you know, J.D. Vance, one of the WhatsApp, I just hate bailing Europe out again. There's a lot of anti-Europe stuff there. Now, we know they don't like Europe. We know Trump doesn't like Europe. But what vivid confirmation that the old kind of relationship between the United States and Europe is dying in front of our WhatsApp eyes. Yeah. And anyway, this all ended up with the editor of The Atlantic. I mean, talk about the thick of it, you know.
And it's called Houthi PC small group. I mean, this is a small group, right? That was the point. But you're right. I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. Talks about POTUS, his directive to reopen shipping lanes, which is why they've started re-bombing Houthi targets again. It's all really fascinating stuff, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, but it is also ridiculous. I mean, this is quite, as Steve says, revealing. So Houthi PC small group sort of suggests that there might have been a bigger group, and this is the side chat that they're having on this.
This is the secure group.
This is the secure group with the small group of people that have accidentally sort of brought in a very critical journalist into their secret negotiations. So ridiculous, of course. But the point of government by WhatsApp and, that social media interaction as well, I think, is a very serious one. Does this seem like a sensible discussion where all the facts are being presented in order to decide, what the action is going to be? Even this sort of ridiculousness of Pete Hesketh saying, I share your loathing, but we are the only ones on the planet on our side of the ledger who can do this. Nobody else is even close. I mean, is this actually anything that's based on fact? Is this about taking strategic account of US strategic interest? It doesn't feel like this is a conversation that is serious. And also, the US government was asked to confirm whether this was real or not. And in the Telegraph, it says it was a demonstration of the deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials. I thought somebody must be having a laugh in the press department, who's had to respond on this behalf, because this is not serious. Look at these emojis. What kind of person sends those emojis when you're thinking about taking strategic
That's actually the National Security Advisor, to be honest with you. There we are.
Ridiculous.
It's both funny and alarming. It's barroom banter elevated from this quote, as Salma was saying, into deep, thoughtful policy coordination. Well, I dread to think it when they're being light-hearted if this is deep,
good job,
thoughtful.
Pete and your team, etc., etc. Yes, and Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist from The Atlantic that you mentioned, said he was added to the group chat 2 days after receiving a connection request from Mr. Waltz on Signal. Mr. Waltz with the punch emoji and the flag and the fire, etc. All really interesting. But what you're expressing here is a slight concern about the tiny group who's making some really significant decisions in the Trump cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. But also the mechanism for making that decision, you cannot, over an app, tapping away at your phone, suddenly decide these things. It's got to be discursive. It's got to be with everybody focused with the same facts in front of them. And I think that, this sort of social media increase in the way that government and people in government communicate with each other is actually to the detriment of good decision-making. And let's not forget that the way messages like this hit your brain and give you a dopamine hit sort of demands that you go back almost in an addictive fashion to try and come back and say these things. That is not a good way for the human brain to process some of these decisions.
Hillary Clinton has retweeted the Atlantic article, "You have got to be kidding me." She, of course, was accused of using private email servers, wasn't she? So, all really interesting, and we'll see what comes out of that. In the meantime, let's do Spring Statement. Big day, Wednesday, and what's up for grabs, or what's up for chopping, should I put it that way?
It's a huge moment because it was just meant to be a report of what the Office of Budget Responsibility had concluded. But they are going to conclude things are so bad, Rachel Reeves is going to have to address that in this moment. And the papers, again, are very wary. So the eye, very varied. The eye focuses on, actually what it is it's not Labour MPs worried about the triple lock being lifted. It won't be on Wednesday. But they are beginning to wonder whether it should be. Because the finances are so tough, the prospects of spending cuts to some departments are horrific.
Like what? What
the so-called unprotected ones, the Home Office, the Justice Department, prisons, etc. In transport, where actually that could be a driver of growth if investment was focused there. These unprotected departments are facing already a nightmarish level of spending constraint. And so some Labour MPs say, well, hold on a second, the disability benefits, which we're cutting, the huge impact of the benefit bill on pensions or the welfare bill could be looked at with this triple lock. I remember Salma's a fan of the triple lock. I'm really against it. I just know there's too many rich pensioners who don't need this triple lock.
Yes, but there are plenty more than the ones that you know who actually really do need the triple lock. And the thing about being on your pension is that the likelihood is that you cannot earn your way into any kind of stable income. It's just not possible for most people at that age. And pensioner poverty is real, which is why the triple lock came in the first place. Now,
but can't you target the poorer pensioners?
There might be a better way of you targeting the poorer pensioners, absolutely, but that's not what this is saying. For some people, the triple lock is a necessity. Now, poor targeting of it is, you know, decades of HMRC and DWP not being able to implement proper digital policies, and that might be where we come back to controversial things like biometric ID cards that was once floated in the Labour government.
Bring those in.
But there is an interesting dynamic to this story. I mean, you know, it feels like everything's been pre-briefed, as quite often happens with autumn statements or spring statements or budgets or whatever, you know, the fiscal event is. And there doesn't seem to be a lot left. So is this perhaps a story that's being run up the flagpole so that they can just signal and litmus test the waters as a potential big announcement that's going to come down the track on Wednesday?
It won't happen on Wednesday. It would be too big. It might happen in the future. It might need to happen. But I don't think it will happen on Wednesday. I don't think she would dare do it.
And also means testing, given what happened with the winter fuel allowance.
Indeed.
I mean, you know, at what point do you start means testing? Hopefully not at that level.
Well, exactly. And the problem with the winter fuel allowance announcement, made in a rush in July unnecessarily, is it means you can't really target pensioners for a second time so soon after that. So I don't think she will do that on Wednesday, but I think it's just interesting that some MPs are saying, look, what are we doing with this triple lock, and cutting everything else.
But by the way, the Conservative Party was doing the exact same, having the exact same conversations, and similar stories were coming up.
I remember.
So we hope that this is not just another thing that the civil services pulled out the top of the drawer that was sort of collecting dust from the last lot that had been in there. And you do have to watch that you're not just trying to make the books balance, you are actually trying to serve the people that elected you.
And The Guardian is also picking up on what we might expect. Rachel Reeves will plough £2 billion into affordable housing in an attempt to sweeten the pill of the spending cuts being announced. So something to put a smile on somebody's face somewhere is the point, isn't it? Amidst rather gloomy growth forecasts and departmental squeeze.
Really gloomy growth forecasts. And Rachel Reeves has elevated the OBR to this sort of godlike body who will descend and tell us how bad things are, and everything has to adapt to that. But it is an interesting counter-briefing that, because there's been a lot of briefings about cuts in civil service, cuts in welfare. We know about the welfare cuts. Here is a spending increase. Now, it's not quite clear where it's coming from and in what form it will take for social housing. But if they have found it $2 billion, I'm not quite sure from where, given all the cuts. But anyway, it would be a good thing. But I think the devil is in the detail with these announcements. But it's an interesting counter spin. Clearly authorised, because it's in several papers.
And the difficulty, obviously, if growth is squeezed, your income at the Treasury is going down. But how much of that is laid at the door of the last budget and therefore the Treasury?
I think there's a lot that can be laid at the door of Rachel Reeves's choices, especially around national insurance and the change in income thresholds in terms of the squeeze on growth. I think that this, you know, even sort of a £2 billion pledge, it sounds like a phenomenally big number. And I assume that's just an in-year spending figure. But when I was at the Housing Department, I looked this up. In the autumn budget of 2017, we pledged £15.3 billion in addition to £10 billion for a Help to Buy equity loan scheme. So that's £25 billion that was there over a 5-year period. This doesn't feel like it even is equal to that, and it would be net negative because of inflation. So I think £2 billion sounds like a lot of money, but let's see the detail.
Very interesting.
It's all going to be interesting, and no doubt we'll, this time tomorrow night, we'll be looking, possibly see what lines come out. But anyway, let's move to the Financial Times. Top picture there. It's, you know, a sixth night of protests in Turkey. You know, what does this mean for President Erdogan? What does it mean for the man who's been jailed as well, Istanbul's mayor? Yeah, so the mayor of Istanbul has been a rival of Erdogan's, and President Erdogan is one of the great strong men
leaders of the world that we've seen, and has been in power for a long time, largely, as is claimed by his critics, as an autocrat that has stopped dissenting voices, this being an example of another one. I do think it's surprising that only the FT has this on their front page to suggest that it might be some sort of investment story. I'm not sure that people have realised how much of our security goes through Turkey, especially when you consider where ISIS fighters travel from, when you think about what's been happening in the region, not just in relation to Israel and Gaza, but also to Syria, and how important Turkey is to our security.
And shipments through the Black Sea from Ukraine, and you know, Russia's taken a lot of sea coastal area as well. So that's part of the negotiations we've seen in Saudi.
So this story has implications for us, and it's interesting in the way that we view news. You know, I see that there is obviously a very big domestic agenda, and that actually sort of, you know, will impact people and the money in their pocket. But this actually, it also has really big downstream consequences for the international order.
Yeah, Steve, your thoughts then? I mean, you know, there's no suggestion people are going to stop demonstrating, is kind of the point, isn't it?
And it's part of the sort of international turbulence. No, I think Salma has put it very well. Turkey is absolutely central to virtually every international story at the moment. The relationship with Trump and the United States, the relationship with Putin, and of course, you know, Turkey wants to get into the European Union. It was big. Do you remember that big poster of the whole Brexit thing? Even though they're not going to be allowed in, but you're right. The protests.
A critical NATO member,
Critical. Is this day 6 of the protests?
Yes.
So clearly, this is something that is building up and not subsiding, and the regime are struggling with it. I think there've been a number of arrests and so on.
Yeah. Well, journalists have been taken from their homes, was the latest reporting tonight. And
as
the FT puts it, those on the streets fear the move against the mayor marks the most alarming step yet by Erdogan and his party to stymie opposition, extend their more than 2 decades of rule, and ultimately transform Turkey into an autocracy. So that's what we're playing here. And of course, the Istanbul mayor is secular. And, you know, that is also contrasting President Erdogan and the way he's run.
And also, you know, Erdogan has always been an interesting character for people like Britain to deal with, because he does have open relationships and dialogues with people like President Putin. So Turkey is not a natural ally in that sense, not least because of Erdogan's positioning. So, you know, any instability there would require us to have a rethink about our position too.
Yes, and, you know, one of the critical stories we talked about, Ukraine, is where we're going next, because dozens of people have been hit after a hospital in Ukraine was bombed. So is a ceasefire now in doubt? Discussing that next.
The Chancellor is looking for ways to promote growth.
Today, I want to talk about economic growth.
What plans will Rachel Reeves forecast for this spring?
Our growth prospects.
And will they bloom?
To British growth for growth, driving economic growth.
Get the full story first on Sky News.
Growth is the #1 mission.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We start with breaking news.
I am Anna Botting.
It's been quite some day.
The golden age of America begins right now.
A long-awaited ceasefire is now underway.
First question, Sky News.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
Describe this feeling, it's incredible.
Now to California.
The Democratic mayor of Los Angeles cut the fire department budget.
Do you owe citizens an apology? Have you nothing to say today?
Jane Secker, Sky News. Would you like to respond to us now?
I've never seen anything like this.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
In principle, would you agree to do that?
Criticism of you, the president, is banned. How is this a fair election?
Historic day here today.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere, waiting to see what the president might do next.
I gave you the A+ treatment. Thank you. Thank you all.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky's security and defence editor. I've covered Russia's full-scale war since it began. witnessing the terror and the trauma.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Steve Richards and Salma Shah. Welcome back to both of you. Salma, let's go to the Metro, shall we? And it's also, interestingly, I have to say, the lead for the Daily Express. Putin's brutal peace offering as talks resume in Saudi Arabia between the US and Russia. This is what Ukraine suffered, you know, a terrible targeting of Sumy with dozens, scores injured.
Yeah, and this is a stage in the negotiations where we know that there is pressure from a lot of sides who are influencing these discussions to bring a peace settlement out. But it's sort of harrowing because this is showing us that the Russian side, at the very least, is not negotiating with good faith. Because you would think that actually targeting a hospital in particular would be an act that they would retreat from because they are trying to show goodwill in order to come to a settlement. But this is kind of the kind of positioning that suggests that there is not good faith in these negotiations.
Yeah, and Daily Express as well. Let's have a look at that. You know, this is their reminder to the Trump administration. Mr. Trump, wake up. Ukrainians are the victims here, you know, of the great debate of, you know, who started this conflict.
Yeah, and this was always going to be the sort of missing element to it all. You know, early on there was a focus of Trump's terrible relationship with Ukraine, but actually the missing element was always, you say, oh, Putin's up for a deal, you know, he's up for a deal. And was he? And is he? And what form? And when he used to say, you know, either the US, I hold the cards, or Ukraine certainly don't hold any cards. Well, Putin has got a few cards, and he obviously sees one of them, continuing to bomb, you know, Ukraine, while these negotiations continue. So it's the missing element to all of this is what would Putin accept in any negotiation. Now, maybe, we were saying earlier, it's a big week, this. Maybe we're about to find out, but it's not at all clear.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at Heathrow, shall we? You know, a few lines coming out today. We certainly saw the Transport Secretary briefing the House of Commons earlier. But here suggesting that the Prime Minister has refused to support the boss of Heathrow amidst questions about whether or not the whole of the airport had to shut down, which is a sort of becoming an interesting debate.
Yeah, so the reason why I think this story is interesting, because it's, again, applying that pressure and applying a set of rules that sort of apply in politics but don't necessarily apply in business. So the chief executive of Heathrow has come under a lot of pressure around his actions. I happen to think that what he suggested was reasonable. If through other investigation, it's found that there wasn't correct risk mitigation around some of this, then I think, we will have to see senior executives considering their positions. But I think it's really unfair, before any of that has come about and any understanding, to try and apply pressure to somebody who's clearly trying to work through a crisis situation. And also for the Prime Minister not to try and support somebody who otherwise has been running critical national infrastructure for a long time. And Heathrow is private. This doesn't really have anything to do with the Prime Minister unless there was a huge security breach. I understand, even the questions around the leadership and the national grid, but I do think it's unfair to pile this pressure on into a business leader.
I agree with nearly all of that, except for the last bit. I mean, I've heard it. Yeah. I mean, Starmer, like the rest of us, doesn't know the answer to the questions of whether it could have stayed open, and therefore I don't think he can completely clear the situation now. But that doesn't necessarily condemn him. We just need to know more.
Steve, Salma, thank you. See you for more at 11. Let's look at the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next few days look fairly calm and dry, some sunshine, but it will be cloudy at times. Southern England will have a mostly fine if chilly start tomorrow. Patchy frost, fog, central parts look rather murky and damp. Northern Scotland can expect sunny spells and a few coastal showers. Cloud and patchy light rain will spread across much of the south during the morning.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.